Good evening to everybody in Europe, good afternoon in New York, and good night in Asia. My name is Sven Huber. It's a great pleasure to be your host tonight for the latest Reschool Byte event. Also, in name of my co-founder, Christina, and the whole Reschool team, I would like to welcome you and thank you for spending the next hour with us. What will be a very entertaining discussion, as I hope. I would also like to thank our sponsors, Fiction Express, AWS EdStart, and Vima, who make this event tonight possible. If you're not familiar yet with Reschool and all our activities, please visit our website, re.school, where you find all information about our activities, upcoming events, and also the reports of previous events, all in one place. If you want to follow us in social media and comment today's event, please use the hashtag RethinkingSchools. And we also live streaming this event in our Facebook page. With that, we jump right into today's topic. It is a great pleasure and honor to present to you today's guest, Carol Allen. Carol is an education advisor for ICT and inclusion. Carol was named as one of the top 10 educators for her work in inclusion, EdTech 2018. She was awarded an EdTech Futurist Award in 2019. Currently, Carol is a member of the DFE Assistive Technology Expert Group, a member of the BET Advisory Team, a BET Awards judge, and has been a panel member and is a contributor to the sessions at the House of Lords for the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Assistive Technology Committee. Carol has taught in both mainstream and special schools for over 35 years. Recognizing that communication lies at the heart of all effective teaching, most of her work has centered on the creative and engaging use of technology to support communication in its broadest sense. An advocate of inclusion and inclusive practices, Carol champions the effective use of both low and high-tech solutions to facilitate access in learning, leisure, and life for those who face barriers. She works across all age groups and levels of ability, providing special ed advice and support locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. Carol, thank you so much for joining us tonight to share your experience and discuss how we can improve learning for those children with need. Welcome.
Thank you. That's lovely to be here.
So before we get started, I would like to invite our live audience to share their point of view on today's topic. We have a quick survey, just 3 very short questions to get a first pulse of what people are thinking about today's topic. So if you could just please very quickly answer those 3 questions. The first one, in your experience, is technology an ally or an enemy of SEND students? Second question, is the technology currently available good enough to make a real difference for SEND students? And question 3, for which of the following neurodevelopmental disorders do we need better EdTech tools? So we can wait another 20 seconds and then we see the result. I think we can see the result now. Let's close the survey. Wonderful. So clearly an ally. Is technology good enough? 2/3 are saying no. And where do we have the biggest needs? In autism, then ADHD, but also dyslexia and dyscalculia. So 50 or more % on all situations. So this is I guess this is the starting point. And let me just let you know, at the end of the event today, we will have time, 15-20 minutes, to answer questions from the audience. So if you want to submit your question, please use the Q&A tab. Please do not the chat. We have everything in the Q&A tab. We will collect all your questions, and at the end of the day, we will pass on a couple of questions to Carol. So according to the Audit Commission, 1 in 5 children in England and Wales has special educational needs. This includes students with severe physical and learning difficulties, but also many students whose reading, writing, and numeracy skills just develop more slowly. In this event, we will focus specifically on the neurodevelopmental disorders, ADHD, autism, and specific learning disorders such as dyslexia or dyscalculia. We will explore how educational technologies can empower children with these learning disabilities to learn effectively in an inclusive environment. We will focus on what kind of learning contexts and educational practices can benefit from technology to create a rich and empowering space for children with learning difficulties. Carol, it's an enormous pleasure to have you here. I would like to start with a personal question. How did you start your path as a teacher focusing on SEND students, which ultimately led you to be awarded in 2018 as one of the top 10 educators for your work in inclusion? How did everything start?
Well, you can all see me, and I'm no youngster, am I? I've been around a long time. And when I always wanted to be a teacher. Let's start with that. I just think we are so honored. It's the best profession in the world. And I always wanted to be a teacher before I went to school. And when I went to school myself as a little girl, I ran a school for my brother, my sister, the local children in our garage. And I made little books and I taught them lessons. And I just have had the same as other people have a passion for ice skating or to fly planes. Me, it was teaching. And I knew that's what I would do. I always knew that's what I wanted to do. So when I get to, I go through exams and I get to university and I'm getting ready to be a teacher. In the final year at sixth form, as a sixth former, before I went to university, you were given an option. And the option was, instead of doing PE, physical exercises and games and sports, you could do what was called Good Works. Now, bearing in mind, I'm an old lady, so that was the title of it, Good Works. And it was basically community service. So you could do, you could do a term visiting the elderly somewhere, and you could do, you get the idea. Anyway, one of the things that I chose to do was to go and work in a local special school, because I knew nothing about special education, because at that time there was precious little inclusion in the UK. The children were completely separate if they were at school at all. Some weren't at school. In my lifetime, there are children who haven't had proper, access to full education. So I went there and, oh my goodness, I just felt like, well, the phrase we use now, isn't it? Find your tribe. I found my tribe. I found where I truly wanted to be. I was very clever at school, and work was no problem at all if I tried. Obviously, if I didn't bother, I didn't do very well. But if I tried, I did really well. So at school, schoolwork wasn't a problem. And then I met children who, no matter how hard they tried, there were things that they couldn't do. And I just thought, this is wrong. This is what I want to do. So I went off to university. Well, I told the people at the school I was working in that I wanted to be a teacher. And a very sage woman took me aside and said, Carol, if you want to be the very best teacher for children with problems and children with barriers, first of all, go and learn to be the very best teacher of everybody you can, because teaching is the same no matter who you're teaching. You shouldn't teach one group differently from another. So go away, become the very best teacher you can, and then come back and you can specialize. So I did that. I went away, did dual honors degree in education, English and education. I did a very unusual degree in the UK. It's one of the few in the UK where you end up, it takes longer, took longer to do it, but you had to teach in a nursery, you had to teach primary, you had to teach secondary, you had to teach sixth form, you had to teach university level, you had to teach adult ed. So you had to do everything, and then you chose where to specialize. And that, I can't tell you, that's the most amazing gift you can give a young teacher, because they see what comes maybe before their bit, or if they're an early years practitioner, they see where they're heading the children towards. Yeah. To give a young teacher the chance to see the whole continuum of our education system before they decide this is my bit is just the most brilliant thing. And so I understood child development, and I understood educational development when I went out. And I went out and I worked very happily in mainstream schools for several years. You moved from one to another. I became senior management in the schools. Loved it. Loved teaching in mainstream. Brilliant. But I never forgot the other children. And they still weren't appearing. We had obviously we had children undiagnosed ADHD, and we had very few children with autism in mainstream at that time. A child with Down syndrome, no, that wouldn't have happened. So I went off and I did a second degree in the education of children with severe multiple profound learning difficulties. And I moved over one summer, and I caused havoc in the authority I work in, because they kept saying to me, we want you to be a head teacher, Carol, we want you to be a head teacher. And I said, no, I want to teach these children. And the phrase that was actually used to me was, you're wasting your time. And that was like a red rag to a bull. I thought, you can't tell me there's a child on this planet that doesn't deserve a good teacher. It's not the bright ones that have to have all the help. They're going to make it anyway. So obviously you can do well with them, but it's the ones who really need help. So to cut a long story short, I moved into the special needs world, and I've loved it ever since. I did a third course at Birmingham University on visual impairment, because it is the most specific area of SEND teaching. So I did that. And I have worked in a variety of schools. Then I became a local authority advisor. And then I was doing more and more work with computers, because seriously, when technology came into one of the schools I was working in, nobody laughed. This tells you how old I am. One of the schools I was working in, we got one multimedia computer on a trolley, and I got to use it on Tuesday afternoons. And that was it. That was my technology. I had a tape recorder, and I saw the difference it made to the kids. I saw what they could do that they couldn't do on paper or with pens. I saw the engagement and the motivation from kids who'd had kind of years of being presented things that they couldn't access, and or they had to have an adult write it for them, sitting next to them, and that kind of thing. So I was hooked. And I thought at that point, right, I'm going to do something. So from there, I have specialized, but it's not just the technology. I see technology as part of the whole package of excellent teaching. It is part of that jigsaw. If you can't just get a bit of technology and say, well, that's fixed it, that's sorted that deficit. It doesn't work like that. So that's how I got into it. And I'm struggling to get out of it at the other end. I'm getting busier than ever, but I'm still here.
Perfect. We will talk about technology and how technology can help a little bit later. Maybe first I would like to step back a little bit and frame the challenge, right? We said before, 1 out of 5 students have special needs.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for the daily work in our classrooms? And I guess, I mean, you said back in those days when you started out as a teacher or decided you want to become a teacher, there was very little inclusion.
Very little.
I would hope
Very little.
you have been improving since then, but there are probably still challenges.
It has improved, and but I've been lucky enough. I love working anywhere, and anyone who wants to invite me, I love to come out to other places in the world, and everywhere you learn something. Even later, I might talk about a job I did in Albania where inclusion is a non-issue. You know, I mean, it's not happening yet. It will, and then some countries are, you know, fully inclusive and really doing their best. What does it mean for your classroom? It means that you cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach. And that's where technology really does help. Your classroom has to become a kind of experimental safe zone. It has to always, the children or the students you work with have to feel safe. We start from that. They have to feel that you are batting for them. You have a can-do attitude. This is one of the things I look for. I'll work with or for anyone, but I want people who really want to make a change. They just don't want to tick a box and say, we've had some training and that's good enough. They want to take the training and do something interesting with it. So we want that. The next thing we want in our classrooms is proper teamwork. Every single person in that adult who is there, whether they be a volunteer, an assistant, the teacher themselves, everybody is part of that team, and teamwork is absolute key. And then the next bit of the team, and crucial, are the parents or carers, the family. The more complex the child is, the more you have to work in partnership with their home environment. And something that this pandemic has taught all of us is that message, which I've been banging about for years, that the home has to work, we have to work together. We have to use their knowledge. They know their child better than you can ever hope to. So if you establish a great working relationship, you can move mountains, you really can. We have to be flexible. We have to be brave enough to say sometimes, okay, I might have done it this way for 20 years, but it's not working for child X. So therefore I have to go a different route, and not stand on your pride that if you just keep pushing it the same way, eventually it'll happen, because it won't. You create another set of barriers. So we have to be flexible. If we're talking technology, you have to be astute enough to understand that just because a child can achieve something on screen. So let's say there's a bit of software that teaches money, the coins of whichever country you're in, right? If you've got a piece of software where the coin, they have to, there's a virtual shop and they have to take their little avatar in and buy something and take the coins out the purse and buy it and blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. I've watched children learn how these games, learning environments, activities, whatever you want to come, they learn how they work, right? And I could apply that. I've taken one from maths, but it could be a spelling, activity, it could, all kinds of things. I've seen some very astute students work out the mechanics of it and get amazing marks. But if you actually gave them the coins and asked them to go into a shop, they couldn't do it. So that's where we have to be very careful as educators and not to assume because somebody's doing brilliantly on screen that that same knowledge and skill set has generalized into something that's of any use to them in the next lesson or in their life. So that's something, a key one for our classrooms. We do have to also understand the implications of the school week, the school term, the school year on children who've got barriers to learning. Let's take dyslexia now. Somebody with dyslexia really struggles, particularly if you've got somebody very bright with dyslexia. It's the whole day currently, or historically, I mean, I'm hoping things are going to change now. Historically, the whole day is a battle. It's an effort. It's you know, you're struggling with, if you've got no support at all, you're struggling the whole day and your self-esteem goes down and you're tired and you go home and then you've got homework to do. And do you know, that's just the end of the road for some kids. So that's hard. They expend far more energy mental energy and physical energy and emotional energy in getting through the day. And I can apply that to autism. I can apply that to ADHD, the masking, the attempting to fit in, to play by the rules, to not stand out in the classroom. Some of these kids go home and just explode. Now then, if we've got this kind of, I don't know, attempt to do their best, then the other thing we have to understand as educators is if we're doing an assessment, there are key times in the week to do it. I don't know if you all know, but the best time to do an assessment, if you want a genuine good, the best possible result, is a Tuesday morning. And the reason for that is Monday, they're recovering and they're transitioning still from a weekend at home to school. So we're still in transition mode. Because a lot of kids, you know, don't make that transition easily between home and school. Tuesday morning, we're usually there. We're not too tired. It's first thing in the morning. You're going to get a fairly good result. If you give, and you can prove it to yourself, guys, give the same test on a Tuesday morning and give it on a Thursday afternoon, last thing, and you will get horrendously different results. And the difficulty there is that if you're dealing with adults or secondary, and there's a set timetable and you only see them at bad times of the week, and you have to, I'm saying to you, you need to make arrangements for assessments at a more optimum time to give that student a fair chance of showing what they actually can do. And obviously this effect is cumulative. So as we get to the end of the week, they're more tired. I mean, we're more tired. You get to the end of a term, you're more tired, and get to the end of the year and you're knackered. So, you know, you need to think about timing of how you work as well. I mean, I can go on and on about this. Is that enough about the classroom?
No, that's wonderful. So as you mentioned, right, there are really a handful of challenges. And now during the last year, we all had to suffer COVID. We went through lockdowns and school closures and distance learning. Yeah, that's difficult for everybody, right?
Yes.
I'm a father of two children, and I see this every day, how everybody is still struggling, right? So I imagine that the challenge must be even bigger for students with special needs. Would you agree? And how can we make sure that this very special situation we are all going through right now won't disadvantage children with special needs even more?
Well, right, here's the thing. Children with special needs are not a homogenous group. And so for some of them, and this, I'm doing a lot of research on this at the moment, for some of them, yes, they have been disadvantaged, particularly if at home they have not a great home life. There aren't, you know, if a lot of homes don't have good internet, don't have technology at home, or maybe there's one computer or one tablet between 4 or 5 children, you know, I mean, there are huge barriers to working at home using technology for some families. So let's just admit that. And I know in the UK, the government said they would address this. They're doing it extremely slowly. I could probably run around and hand out things more quickly, but we won't be too political. So first of all, they're not a homogenous group. Secondly, there are barriers, technological barriers at home. Thirdly, there are some students where, and I know we're not talking about them in this seminar, but I am going to mention them, those with profound multiple learning difficulties who can't do anything without one-to-one adult support, you know, who are working at a sensory level and so on and need to be positioned and have their hands into ice and so on. So those students, it's not so easy in some respects to teach remotely. But here's the thing. What we're discovering is there are groups of children, and I can give you examples, particularly with dyslexia and with ADHD and with autism. No, we'll start with the other two, ADHD and dyslexia, who are doing really well, thank you very much, and actually don't want to go back to school. And the reason that they're giving me, and when I talk to these students, is they've got more control. So when we do remote teaching, it is asynchronous on the whole. So remote teaching, there is some live lessons and that they people have to attend, but then there's a task given and they've got the time to do it. And for example, one boy with ADHD said to me, well, you see, Carol, he said, the teacher sets a task on Zoom. And I said, right. And he said, then we've got an hour to do it, like in the lesson. I said, right. And he says, and sometimes I think better if I go and run around for a bit. So he said, my mum says that's fine. So I go and I jog around the garden, and I do a few basketball hoops, and I kick the ball into the goal 10 times. And when I've got it in 10 times, I come back in and I work. And my brain's been thinking all the time. But he said, if I tried to do that in school, I wouldn't be allowed to do that. And he said, I'm getting better marks now because I can work my own way, there's an interesting thing, isn't it? A child with dyslexia said to me, and I can give you hundreds of these stories. Child with dyslexia said to me, Carol, he said, I've got all the same tech at home as I've got in school. He's from a nice family. They've set up beautifully. But he said in school, there are sometimes problems with using it. So for example, if I'm having text to speech, it disturbs the other people in my group. But at home, it doesn't disturb anyone because there's just me sitting there. And he said, and I don't feel embarrassed using it. And I said, well, would that make a change when you go back? He said, yes. He said, I don't think I can go back to not using these things properly because my marks have gone up because I'm using the technology properly. Loads of them mentioned the ability to go and get a snack and have a drink, which obviously we don't just let, if we've got a class of 30, we don't say, oh yes, away off, go and get something, a sandwich to eat. We don't do that. And neither am I saying should we, but what I'm saying is it's wrong to assume that the whole of these children at home are being disadvantaged because some of them are absolutely blossoming. And I've got some remarkable examples whereby one little boy was being investigated for failure to thrive, primary age. He's dyslexic, without a doubt. He hasn't been assessed yet, but he's without a doubt dyslexic. And he's 7.5. And he's been going to the pediatrician to be monitored for his height and weight. And he had food aversions, and he's had difficulty sleeping through the night. And, or you name it, they've really worried about this little boy. The first bit of the pandemic, his mum said to me, I can't get him to do any work. He just screams, he cries, it's destroying our relationship as mother and child. And I said, in that case, just stop it for now. Stop it. Just let him be and reestablish, bits just like reading with him and so on slowly. Just let him be. Just tell the school you can't do any of the stuff. And if you have a problem, I'll write them a proper letter. And we let him be. And of course, he came back and I showed him some of the technology that nobody's shown him yet to use. He's not one of my students. He's a neighbor. And guess what? School anxiety's gone. He's sleeping through the night. He's been to the pediatrician and they said, well, there's your answer. It's the fact that school doesn't work for him. And he's doing just fine, absolutely fine. And we've got him now using technology and actually quite keen to go back to school to show other people what he can do. Sure. So it is hard for some children with autism. There are a group of children, young people with autism, who are saying to me, why am I doing school at home? School is here and home is here and never the twain shall meet, But then a lot of others are quite happy to be there. So the answer to the question is that they're not a homogenous group. And we're wrong to make any group assumptions. You have to look at the individuals and say, right, this is working for them and this isn't working, and how can we change it? So we're back to having a can-do problem-solving attitude.
Sure. I think it's really encouraging, right? All those examples where we see that kids are actually doing better, right? Yeah. Because they can be more as they are, right? And that would be probably the case even for students who don't suffer any additional problems, right?
Absolutely.
So maybe we should them allow to go out to kick the ball 10 minutes and then do the thinking, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's a lot to be learned in this pandemic we're going through to see how we can really do better, because right now we are forced to break out of those very standardized ways of doing things, right?
I think so that's what's important. And that's why I'm quite excited by your website, because it's suggesting that we should be doing that, which I think we're mad. We are mad if we do not grab this moment. when it's okay, we didn't want COVID, we didn't want what it's done to us, it's been awful, and it still is awful. However, we're learning things that we maybe wouldn't have got round to learning, and we've got to grab them, folks, and make things better, you know.
So from our initial conversation, I know that you're working globally across countries, across continents. When it comes to inclusion, where do you see big differences between countries? Who are the best practices? Where are the best practices we can learn from? And
you know what?
really
You can
forward?
learn something everywhere you go. You never, the day you think that this is better than this, or you are better than that's, well, you shouldn't be doing the job. Everywhere you go, you learn something. You do see countries which are expert in different areas. Yeah. So for example, Australia has got a really good, and they're pushing, it's not there yet, but they are pushing, spelled SPELD, are pushing to have a consistent research evidence-based approach across Australia for the teaching of reading, which will support children with dyslexia, but will support everyone because it's basically good phonics-based teaching. So if I go to Australia, I know I've done 2 trips out there and worked right round, and I've got contacts now. If I want information on, you know, best practice in those areas, that's where I would go. They do other great things. I'm just trying to pick some cherries. Yeah.
Sure.
I've seen some absolutely lovely work on assistive technology in America. I love their concept of UDL, Universal Design for Learning. I love the fact that they're putting a lot of things into law so that you have to do stuff. You are obligated to do stuff. Now that brings different problems with it, you know, but they're doing some lovely work on assistive technology. And I find that quite refreshing. A lot of the work I do out there is around autism and around literacy, creative literacy and autism. That's what they tend to be focusing on at the moment. They've got a very interesting, you learn a lot from how the different systems work. So each state has almost its own education system. And so wherever I go to work, I have to quickly find out how they're playing the game and match my help to where they already are. You can't make assumptions, but then you shouldn't make assumptions anywhere, should you? But I'll give you an example. In Albania, I several years ago went to work in Albania, and it was fascinating because at the time we went there, it was myself and a man called Ian Bean, and we were sponsored by a company called Inclusive Technology to go. And we'd had a request to go out and help because children with additional needs were not included in mainstream education, not. Instead, if you had a child with additional need, this is about 9 years ago now, if you had a child with an additional need, they were put into the institution system. You gave them up as a parent and they went into the institutions. And this group that we went out to work with were training 2 teachers to show that these children could be educated and that they didn't need to go into the institution. They could stay at home. And so it was the craziest week because, for example, on Monday, we worked to show the teachers how to work with somebody who was blind. On Tuesday, we worked with somebody who was autism. Wednesday, we did cerebral palsy. Thursday, we did, do you see what I mean? So it was like a rocket ship. But every afternoon, we went and we worked in the institutions and we met the conditions there and we tried to make changes. We met teachers who were trying to do things and do brilliantly with no resources. Anyway, I've said to you, one of the sea change was happening and parents, because of the internet, were seeing that in our countries, these children didn't have to go separate place. They could stay at home and they could be educated. Anyway, the family of a little girl called Cindy, who had cerebral palsy, it was so cold when we were there. Cindy arrived to work with us every day, and she was so many jumpers and so many coats. Her hands were basically stuck like that. You could hardly bring them together because she had so many coats on. And once we gave Cindy the opportunity to use technology, you could just see what a clever girl she was. She hadn't had a voice before. And what came out of it is this book. Because what Cindy started doing was writing poetry, and they were sending me the poetry. And I said, if you send me the poetry and the translation, I'll get her published. And we'll show that a child who should have been in an institution can be published. So I've got photos of Cindy and key people in her family. So there's Cindy. Or, well, she's older now. And on each page, I've got the poem is in Albanian, and then it's a translation into English. And we put it together under her construction, and I paid just for it to be self-published. And then I sent 40 copies back, and her parents were able to say, my daughter is published. And the impact on that. So none of that is possible without technology. We could not have done it any other way without technology. And so little things, you sometimes don't realize you're making life-changing things. If a child has no voice, and you let a child with autism maybe has a voice but chooses not to use it, and you give them text to speech, or you give them a communication aid, you suddenly give them a voice and you empower them, and they can become independent learners. So it's brilliant. It is brilliant doing what we do.
That's a beautiful example, and thank you very much for making this possible for Cindy. That's really great. So let's drill down a little bit more into the role of technology in EdTech, if you may. So which are the main benefits? You mentioned already a couple of examples. Maybe going back to the example with the coins that you mentioned before. So I learn paying with coins in like a computer game, but then I have trouble to really do it in real life. Mm-hmm. So how can we use technology in a really meaningful way that the learning can really transfer into real life?
And this is the bit that I'm fascinated by. This is the bit, because where the magic happens is when the technology is part of the educational offering. It's not the be all and end all of the educational offering. So having a piece of software or a resource which is holistic in the sense of the example I gave you with the money, right? Mm-hmm. Unless you match that with effective teaching, then we're not doing a good enough job. So let's take the money one as an example. First of all, they're doing it beautifully there. Secondly, you want to set up a cafe in your school or your establishment, do some cooking, because that's your other, it brings in language and number skill and production and organization, and it's just fun anyway. And run a little cafe once a week, bring the people in. So you're dealing with money in a real life situation, but safely within your school. Then there are usually shops and things nearby, so you can start to teach traveling the route with an adult, maybe with two people, buying one thing, bringing it back successfully, working it out, checking bills. These are also life skills, aren't they? I also now include, if I'm doing this kind of work with somebody or with a school, teaching them about online money. Because let's face it, we all buy from, Amazon and eBay and, whatever is in your area, Facebook groups. So it's about learning about online money, that is real money. And that has got issues, for example, when children are buying apps that they shouldn't, and they crack the password and run up these things. And partly, yes, children can always crack past the passwords. They always can. So, what we need to do is get them to understand that is real money. It has a value. It's not just a number. And let's face it, I should teach myself that late at night when I'm fed up and I'm busy buying things, and then strange packages appear the next day. So it is part of that. It's also part of looking for other tech resources that allow you to move sideways and generalize. So what other activities are there online? So if we take reading, for example, let's take reading. We can read real books, and we could use a scanning pen to read a real book if we wanted to, or we could use, there's apps where you can photograph the page and have it read to you, etc., etc. So we can have real books, and we can go to bookshops, and we can go to libraries, and we can make a love of books, and that's all fabulous. Then we can have online books, book service, and there are many, and they are brilliant. They are brilliant things. What a fabulous offering. And particularly if you've got a child with a physical disability who can't hold a book, can't be independent themselves. Suddenly we've got this online world of books, and that is genius. So there we've got that. Then we've got the fact that we can use apps. I mean, the most obvious one is Book Creator, but there's lots of them, Story Maker, anything you want. Apps or online things where we can make our own stories. And some of the best book or reading websites have the ability for you to, the student, to create their own stories as well, you know, create and do their own stories. And I have to be honest, the bigger the problems a student faces in accessing education, the more they're interested in themselves. If they're not interested, if we haven't got engagement with the book, they're not going to read it, are they? They're not, well, they might do it mechanically. So there's got to be motivation, there's got to be education, engagement. And let's be honest, they love stories about themselves. So you might want to start with stories about themselves. And then I do a little jump. And so I might put them into well-known story that they like. So for example, I had one boy who was a very reluctant reader, but he loved the Harry Potter films, loved them. So what we did there was we started with stories all about him. And when I got bored, let's be honest, he would have done that for years. I got bored with those. Then we took a section from Harry Potter, a bit of a story, and we put 2 new characters in. I became one of the teachers and he became one of the students. And so we cut and pasted Harry Potter and made a whole new story. And so you're taking their interests and leading them on until, do you know, I have never yet had a child where if you do it successfully, that magic light doesn't go on at one point where they realize, actually, there's a whole world of books out there and I can be transported all over. You know, I see somebody's just put Oxford Owls up. Yes, Oxford Owls brilliantly. If you haven't tried Storyline Online, that's one of my, I just, you know, I can spend hours on Storyline Online. I love it. But it doesn't matter what you use or how you use it. It's about you creating that magical connection between what the student's doing with the tech and their ultimate learning. So we need to take it out. Basically, we need to take the information that or the skill that you want them to learn away from their working memory and embed it into their long-term memory so they can retrieve it. And it's a proper bit of knowledge. It's not just something they can do for 10 minutes and then it's lost.
So talking about this magical like link, right, between the content, the learning content and the students and their personal situation.
Yeah.
So when it comes to designing edtech products, and we have seen in the initial questions that there's a majority of people think the edtech products that are out there are not as good as they should be. So how should edtech products, how should learning technologies be designed for, maybe for students in general or for students with special needs, taking into account that every student is its own world, so we cannot take them as a group, as you said before. But what would be the key elements of designing good edtech products for this group of students? Okay,
so I separate it very simply into 3 sections, right? In the UK, we have a brand of paint called Ronseal. And Ronseal's tagline is, does what it says on the tin. So if you buy blue paint for your fence outside, your fence will be blue and it'll be waterproof. If you buy white paint to redo your kitchen, it'll be white and it'll be able to wipe down because it's a kitchen. So a Ronseal product is something that does what it says on the tin. So my first category of what we need for EdTech are the Ronseal products. So what they do is they do one thing exceptionally well, exceptionally well. I often can't change much of the offering. It's not often flexible. This is what we do. The content is set, but they do it really well. It's sound, they've thought it out, and those are good little products, okay? The second category is what I call the flexible products, and these are framework products. So they are products which do contain content, but they offer me the opportunity to add my own content. So for example, if it was a spelling, if I use a spelling example, a Ronseal one would just have set lists and they would be linked to the curriculum properly, and we would go through this one to this one to this one, but I couldn't put my own. A flexible spelling one would allow me to, for example, take, as I've had to do, that somebody who was refusing to do weekly spellings at all until I put all the footballers from his favourite football team in. And he learnt those spellings, which were far harder than the ones his teacher wanted him to do. And he learnt them before the week was out, and he could get 20 out of 20 as long as it was the footballers. And what that exercise proved to him was that actually he could learn to spell. He just needed to be interested enough to do it, you see. So so what we had there. So a flexible product has content there that I can pull down from some companies, like, for example, Crick and Clicker. They have a very, very flexible product, which they provide frameworks, they provide structures, and they've got an online area of grids that you can look and see, has somebody taught that before, and pull it down and amend it. But you can make your own in seconds. And so that's what I call a framework product, where they've made the kind of space that I teach in, that they've given me a skill set of ideas and tools and accessibility tools. And they've even given me some ideas to get started. And so that's what I call a framework product. And the third group, and we mustn't underestimate this, is that nowadays, everyday technology is also part of special needs technology. So for example, Alexa is not designed as special needs software. Alexa, Siri, Google, whoever you want to do, but I'm going to use Alexa.
Exactly.
So for example, I found one of my boys doing brilliantly at his maths homework. And the reason was he would write the question in his book and then ask Alexa what the answer was. And so he wasn't doing any thinking at all. And so we changed it so that he could use Alexa to check his answers, but he had to do them first, if you see what I mean. But Alexa can be linked now, of course, to environmental control, can't it? You know, and so the everyday products, GPS in a car. Nobody uses a map now, unless you're kind of, I don't know, a little bit strange. So
I haven't used one in 20 years.
No, I've got loads of maps, but I no longer drive somewhere with the map propped up, looking at it. I stick my little GPS thing, and it tells me which lane to go in and where. And you know, there's smart technology around our houses, and so that can be used for us for teaching as well. If we're teaching cause and effect, then it works perfectly. If we are trying to give somebody a voice, it works perfectly. If that lad wants to check his homework things, that works perfectly once you found out what he's doing. You know, so we've got those three strands. So what should you do as a company? You need to decide what you're trying to offer. That has to be the first thing. I want no wishy-washy, this is going to be brilliant for Down syndrome. I really struggle when somebody sends me something and says, this is the, you know, what have you got for Down syndrome? Is there a single resource or app that takes away any difficulties or positives that child might have? No, because they're all different who just happen to have Down syndrome. They're completely different levels, abilities, needs. So I do struggle when somebody says, you know, this is brilliant for X. It might well be brilliant for X, but it might also be brilliant for 20 others in my class. 20 others might love to use it. Why should, Sven, supposing you're in my class, right? I'm going to go back to the scanning pen example. Supposing you're in my class and you're dyslexic and I give you a scanning pen so you can read, right? And 3 desks away, there's a girl who can read, but it's an effort. She's not quite there yet. Why should she not have the pen as well? Why should she not have the pen? Why should a really bright youngster who's 5 or 6, really gifted and talented, who wants to understand the NASA website? At the moment, we've got a lot of children interested in the space and the landing on Mars.
Right.
The NASA website's quite hard. Of course we can give them text to speech so they can learn it themselves. They don't have to have an adult there sitting doing it. That's just crackers. So everyday software is there. So if you're an ed tech resource or company, decide what you're offering. I would always say, before you've finished it, ask advice before it's a finished product. Because sometimes, for example, I'll get a thing, would you come and work with us? And I'd say, yeah. And then they say, well, we can't do that because that wasn't in the coding, and we can't do that because, and you just think, well, why did you ask me then? You know, you just do it the way it is and we'll use it the best we can. So try and ask for some advice, and be as, I do like UDI. I like the American principles of universal design for learning. It's just about thinking about everybody and not the majority. Let's try and think about everybody. And there is never going to be something that's perfect for everybody. So accept you can't be all things to all people, and decide what you're going to be good at, what your Ron Seal bit is, and be proud of that. And, you know, and if somebody says, but it doesn't do this, say, yeah, okay, we haven't designed it to do that. That's fine. That's fine. That's a fair answer in my field.
Sure, but let me push you a little bit more. So I'm a teacher. I have a given situation in the class. How do I decide which product to use, right? And what type of products? I mean, is it really, would you say there are situations where the one thing exceptional well-doing product is better than the flexible product? Or where do I start as a teacher?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I've answered the wrong question.
No, that was the question. That was just a follow-up question.
Okay, so the first thing is, if you are a teacher in a school or a college or a university or wherever, the first thing is, what have you got on offer as a general offer? So, for example, are you a Microsoft institution? Are you a Google institution? Are you an Apple institution? And step one is to all of those big 3 have got fabulous accessibility features. All 3 have. And this wasn't the case a few years ago. And now what's lovely is they're fighting between themselves. So the next iteration brings out something better with this one. So these guys are going, oh my God, they've got that. We need to have something better. And, you know, so...
Sure. Positive competition, right?
Yeah. So first of all, you probably have to use what's in your environment. So you have to understand what the potential is of that product first. Then you look for the things that it can't do for that child. So if you've got a child still struggling, so all the basics are there in the big 3: text to speech, speech to text, flexibility of format, organization skills, you know, mind mapping, all note-taking, calendar, everything around the kind of things that our students struggle with: self-organization, progression, sequencing. They're all there in the big 3. So you need to understand how those work. But then, yes, what do you do next? So first of all, I make and I haven't given up finding things. So I go to as many normal times, I go to as many shows as I can, and I go and see, and I walk in, I don't just go at the big guys, I go right round the corners and find the little products. The man who's just starting off with something for the first time. I told you how I met Fiction Express the first time, and It was exactly that. It was one man standing on a tiny little stand showing something, and he was bursting with pride. And I stood there and watched this demo, and then I said, I'll come back later. I need to see more. It's really good. Need to come back. And so I always do that. Always do that. Second thing, at the moment, if you're not on social media, Twitter, brilliant for finding out. So it depends what you want to follow. So you know what, everybody should know what a PLN is, Personal Learning Network. You build your PLN up. by, if there's somebody says something interesting, then look to see who they follow and follow some of those, and then kind of chain it backwards. You can always unfollow somebody if they turn out to be boring. So for example, there is a head teacher in the UK who I follow because he is probably the best person to follow on children's literature. He must read everything that ever comes out. I don't know how he's got any money to live. And he will kind of review all these books. And I try not to look at his Twitter feed now because it costs me a fortune, because then I go and buy them because I want to read them. He's particularly into picture books, children's picture books. So social media is there. And can I just say, social media is also brilliant. Once you've built up a PLN, and an international one is even better. So guys, you know, if you're from all over and you want to connect with me, I'll follow you back, because then you can say something like, I have a child who's struggling with X, Y, and Z. I've tried this. Can anyone suggest the next step? And you will get help. People from all over the world will help you. And you can, you know, you're sensible. You can sift through the answers. There'll be one or two idiots and you just thank them, but don't do it. And there'll be loads of really good stuff. And there'll be people who say, yeah, I taught a child like that. Now, just because they had success using a particular bit of technology doesn't mean it's necessarily right for yours, but you can strike up a conversation. Then, of course, there are blogs, looking at blogs, and, you know, that there's not so much blogging at the moment, but there's more vlogging going on. So following people online. Then, seriously, in our work, you quickly find out who are the companies who are genuine, who are the ones who just want to sell you something and meet their target at the end. And I can spot those ones a mile off, and I bet you can. But you know what, guys, on the whole, people who are in our field are really there. Yes, they've got to make money. They're a business. So let's not pretend otherwise. And that's fair enough. They've got to feed their children and pay their mortgage. It's fine. But they also genuinely care, and they listen to you. And when you say something like, oh, that's fabulous, but they might say, ours doesn't do it, which is a very honest thing. Or they might say, oh, that's going to be in the next iteration, so stick with us. And when you find good companies, support them and give them good feedback and support them on social media, because you know what? The companies have had a very difficult time during this pandemic, without a doubt. They all have. And it's got to be, we've got to help each other. Is that a bit better answer? There's so many places to find out.
That is a wonderful answer. And I really liked what you said, go out on social media and ask, right? So, because there's so many experiences out there. And this is actually one of the reasons why we set up Reschool last year, to bring together teachers from all over the world and just discuss challenges we have and discuss ideas and build a better future together, right? So once we have found this good product or the right technology, I think schools often cope with another barrier, right? The teachers' digital skills and teacher training.
Yeah.
So what are the ICT skills required by teaching staff to exploit really the technology educational potential? And maybe to add in another question, how to keep teachers up to date with the range of hardware and software to support their pupils?
That's the keeping up to date's a toughie, because even if you do it all day, every day, like I do, more or less, I still don't know everything. So it's about having that learning network. So I'll give you an example. Switch technology, using switches to access the computer. I am pretty good with that, but I have friends who that's their only job, their only focus, the only thing they do. So I will go as far as I can, and then I will phone a friend or email a friend or tweet a friend and say, look, I'm up to this point. What do I do next? You can't just accept, you cannot be all things to all people. So that's why you have to have a network. It's too big a topic. It's too big a thing. So I'm a very collegiate worker. I think that's really important. Then, so sorry, what was the first bit? The second bit was about keeping up to date. And the first bit was, what do you do about their own initial teacher training skills? That was it.
Yeah.
So I also teach on initial teacher training courses. and I do that, zoom in to them and chat at the moment. Some of them I normally can come to. And I talk to them about the importance of technology and about getting it right and the skills. Now, what we're finding is the young people coming through as teachers have a much higher level of technological skill than I did, obviously, because when I came through, you know, the phone was a big thing and it was fixed. It wasn't even mobile. I can remember my brother getting a mobile phone when he was about 22. And oh, I was so jealous. I was so jealous. And, you know, anyway, and look, now we've all got these things everywhere. So the teachers that I'm training when they come through know how to use technology. What they don't know is how to make that magic between the technology and the student, the technology and the learning. And so showing them a bit of software, they can work out how the software works pretty quick, more quickly than I can.
Sure.
But then they have to understand how to make that part of an intervention or part of a life, and then what the impact is and how to evaluate that, how to use formative assessment. Because sometimes you'll try something and it doesn't work and you have to go, okay, fair enough, let's try another route. It's not the end of the world. Failure is a positive in my field. It's a positive.
So following that thought, that is really important, not only to understand the technology itself, the product, the software itself, but how to use it in teaching, in special situation, right? So could mainstream schools learn from special schools here? Because obviously special schools have much more exposure and experience that. Is that something that is happening? Is that something you see?
It is happening, and the other way around as well. Special schools learning from working together is the key. And also companies who've got like, right, okay, you're Fiction Express, but you've created this reschool where educational things are talked about and discussed and shared and ideas are shared. And other companies are doing webinars and Zooms and things, you know, where you can find out about, obviously, usually their product, but other products as well. I know another company in the UK that's organizing online conferences, and it's not all about their product, but they're bringing people together to have these discussions. So I do think one of the things we've got as a result of this pandemic is more sharing of ideas online, more different ways of conference. I mean, you've got an international gathering tonight, and for us to have got together, I venture a lot of us wouldn't have had the money to fly to a particular point, you know, if we tried to do it.
And so we wouldn't have done it, right?
No, so it wouldn't have happened. We might have done something in one of the countries and had people just from that country nearby, but we wouldn't have had people from all over. And surely that's one of the beauties of technology for us learning now, is that companies like you saying, yeah, come on, let's all get together and let's share ideas, and let's learn from each other.
That's wonderful. That's almost a wonderful finishing words. But before we pass on to the questions of our live audience, I think a couple of questions has been coming in. Would you like to share any additional thought? Anything we have not touched upon and you think is really important in the context of today's topic?
I think you'll have guessed, I'm quite passionate about getting this right. I think I would implore everybody who's taken the time to come to switch their brain to a can-do attitude, and don't allow your colleagues to pull you back. Don't allow other people, when you come up with a great idea and you say, we could try this, them to go, oh, but it might be this, or this might happen, or we can't, you know, it's how we're going to do that, or don't let people stop you from doing the right thing. I always say when I'm working with groups of people face to face, if that was your child, and would you want somebody who didn't go the extra mile? Would you want somebody who didn't find out about your child? Would you want somebody who just said, oh, that's good enough, that'll do, when your child's still struggling? Would you want somebody who was prepared to just have a go and be wrong sometimes? I just can't stress enough that you might have a child only for a few years in your school or your college or wherever you work, but that's that child's major educational life chance. And if you don't pull your finger out and have a go, it's lost time. It's lost time. And for some of our kids, they're struggling to make up time anyway. So I guess what I'm saying is you must care, you guys, because you're here tonight and you've given up your own time. So you must care. And I think it's our job to make everybody care, because every single child deserves, as best as we can get it at this moment in time. You know, the poll you did at the beginning about the second question was, is there technology to, what was it? It was, is there technology to...
Is the currently available technology good enough to make a real difference?
Okay, so
66% no.
Said no. And I would have said yes, because firstly, I'm a pragmatist. The current technology is all I've got. So if I'm going to say it's not good enough, that's saying I'm not going to make any change. This is what I have right now. And this is what I have to work with. And I absolutely know I can make life-changing educational and life decisions with what I have at the moment. Would I like more? Of course I would. Of course I would. But it'll come. We didn't have eye gaze a few years ago, and we've got eye gaze control now. This laptop I'm working on, if I'm feeling really lazy, I can type with my eyes, and frequently I do. So we, you know, that I was really quite saddened to see people saying we haven't got the right thing. You don't wait for it, guys. You don't wait for it to be there. Those children are there now. Use what we've got, use it as well as we can, and then when we get more, we make it better.
I didn't understand the 66% as an excuse we cannot do things. I think it was just the...
I know.
The idea probably we could do better, right? Technology.
Yes. Oh,
could be able
absolutely.
to
I don't mean to offend anybody.
No,
really.
no, but
It's fair. It's fair comment. Fair comment. We always want more, don't we? We always.
No, that's fair. And I think this is where we then push also to do things better tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So with this, I would like to bring on my co-founder, Christina. She has been looking at the questions from our audience. Christina, just go ahead. Your turn.
Hi. Good night. Good evening. Such an inspiring webinar, Carol. We had lots of people sharing experiences, and so let's go for the first one. So one of the lessons learned during this pandemic is try and let them walk their own path. Is that it? Is let them walk their own way?
Yeah. Well, I think yes. Within constructs, you know, we have to always say within parameters, within constructs. But I am one of the mistakes we've made during this pandemic using technology is to try and replicate exactly classroom experience that we had before and put it online. And that doesn't work. You guys, if you do a 3-hour Zoom, you're knackered. We're exhausted. We're visually exhausted. We're mentally exhausted. And certainly even presenting it, you come off and you go like this, you know. So what are we doing to these little kids? You know, what are we doing to them if we expect it to be the same? Whereas in a classroom, I can look around a class and I can see they're losing interest, and we can jump up and play a clapping game, or we can, you know, we can do a, have you ever seen Go Noodle, the website Go Noodle? Oh, fabulous fun. And we can play finger games and things with the Go Noodle guys. So I can interrupt the learning. When I'm on a Zoom, it's not quite the same, although I'm recently experimenting with fun things to do on Zoom that just get people up and running around their house as part of their learning. But the point we have learned is that some children are benefiting from having that asynchronous thing. So you do a little bit of an input and then you say to them, we need this, this, and this done. And they go off and do it themselves, and they do it their own way. And yes, and I think certainly if I was young enough that I was going back into a classroom after this, I would be changing how I learn, how I set tasks and things to allow more flexibility of how people covered things. Yes, I would.
Well, our friends, Jack and Emma, agreed with you and more of them, but I just registered those two. But they say the only issue is that those kids missed their friends during the pandemic, during the lockdown. This is the worst issue for them.
Yeah. And it's the worst issue for all of us, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, one of my sons is in London, and I'd give anything for him to walk through the door right now. I could get quite teary just thinking about it. I'd be fed up with him within half an hour when there were dirty clothes lying around and the beer had all gone. I'd be fed up with him again. But right now, I would love to see him. Would love to see him. And they do. They're missing their friends. They're missing their social interaction. And we can do stuff on Zoom. We can, you know, we can try and do social-y things, but it's not the same as being together. And that is hard. And that is one that is going to have to be addressed. And it's going to be on the shoulders of teachers when the children go back. Because remember, we've got some children who'll be starting school. In the UK, we start in the year they go 4 to 5, right? And we've got some children who will have been really in lockdown for most of their, if you like, conscious early childhood, because you can't count when they're a baby because they, you know, but where they would have been going out to little nurseries or meeting friends in a park or play groups or people coming together, mummies coming together or daddies coming together, and people, we're going to have children where there are some issues around getting on and cooperating and being with other people. And the missing the friends, whoever said that in the question, you're right, I've got no magic answer for that. They genuinely miss their friends. Not so bad as teenagers, because the online gaming allows chat and connection that way. And a lot of them did it that way beforehand, and they're still doing it. Yeah. So it's not so bad at teenager. I would say the crucial age for this kind of big loss are the ones who are not old enough to be doing kind of the online whatever, gaming, whatever.
Thank you. And can you share some specific resources for dyslexia? This was a question from Portugal.
Oh, yes. I mean, absolutely. There's some fabulous stuff. First of all, with dyslexia, start with anything that's good that allows access to reading. So let's just not think about the dyslexia for a minute, because the children with dyslexia develop a kind of a worry and anxiety around books, about reading. The magic goes out of it. So first of all, bring the magic back with access to online stories, with access to printed out stories, with you reading them. Then I cannot recommend highly enough Text Help Read and Write Gold is a fabulous product. Really, really good. And some aspects of it are free within a Chrome browser. So you can get started with it. I love scanning pens. I've got a lovely story about scanning pens, but we haven't got much time, so I'll save that one in case you ever invite me back. So I love scanning pens for dyslexia. I like Nessie for dyslexia, and Lexia. Those are both online. They're Ronseal products. Lexia and Nessie are the Ronseal ones. Hang on, I just need a drink, sorry.
We will share those resources that you're mentioning in the report.
But what I'm going to say is, if you're using Nessie or if you're using Lexia, bear in mind what I've put as a big warning. The children get very good at Nessie, get very good at Lexia, and then they go to the next lesson, they can't read. So you have to do it as part of a proper, holistic way. But here's the key thing. The key thing is to start by taking the pressure off and reigniting an engagement and a love of stories and books. Because
so bring the magic back.
Bring the magic back first.
This is the first step.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any site apart from social media where I can find different options of resources for different disabilities?
Yes. It doesn't really matter which country you're in. Does it really? If you just Google, use good old Google and say, what are the best top 10 resources in 2020 for dyslexia? You'll get a variety of suggestions depending on where in the world it comes from, right? Or who's paid to have their stuff higher up, you know. Every year I look at, so I'm a Bet Awards judge, and every year, the Bet Awards this year, they're normally announced in January at the Bet Show. But the Bet Show was virtual this year. So the Bet Awards are going to be, I think, announced in June.
In June, yeah.
And they're always worth looking at because people, the judges, they take it really seriously. You know, we analyze really carefully in the categories you're in. We look at the stuff carefully, and it's well worth having a look and see what comes out there. Even it's not your subject, it might help one of your colleagues, and you know, you might be able to suggest it. Look at who wins awards. Don't worry if somebody doesn't win an award. Also look at who entered, because there's some, inevitably in a competition.
A lot of competition, right?
Yeah. Inevitably in a competition, it goes like that, doesn't it? And then somebody wins. But you know what? There's sometimes down there, you know, some of the people who entered have got brilliant stuff. Just maybe they didn't meet one of the criteria properly or something. And so they don't. So fabulous. Look at who takes the time to enter. Google it. Yes. Go to conferences as soon as you can. And anything else? Oh, Emma, 7 this morning in the UK. Bless you. Frazzled, so am I, love. I'd like to tell you that's water, but it's not. Off you go.
Okay. Another question, it was related to the communication between teachers and families. How can we facilitate the communication between teachers and families? And do you recommend that we organize workshops with them?
Yes. Oh, yes. One of the most successful projects I did was several years ago. I wanted to look at how we could use technology as a kind of conduit between home and school for children who had no voice, right? So what we did was we picked some bits of technology, for very simple video camera, that kind of thing. Little handheld video camera, little easy ones. Now I would be doing it with iPads, I suppose, but at the time I did what I did. And we picked some families and we gave the same kit to the classrooms and we gave the same kit to the families at home, free of charge. I even went out to every family that needed it installed, something installed and set up. We went out and did that. Then we ran training sessions very, very slowly. So we taught one thing, like how to use video was the first one, right? Remember, I'm talking a few years back. I would do it slightly differently now, but the same principle, how to use video. And in that session, we did it in the afternoon in school, and we had the teacher and the parents learning at the same time. So there's no, you're not better and you're not better. We are together learning how to use this, right?
Oh, interesting.
And then we set a task, and the task was that they had to send, the school had to send 3 bits of video home a week of the child doing things, and parents had to send 3 bits of video of the child doing things but instead of writing in a little diary or something like that. And we went on like that. And oh my goodness, it was just the most amazing project. Princess Anne came to see it. For heaven's sakes, I can tell you a whole big story about that. But but what it taught me was that we often talk about difficult parents, hard to reach parents. Do you know what? They're just very tired people doing their best. They're just, yes, Seesaw. Somebody's just put Seesaw up. Yeah. Brilliant app, absolutely brilliant and totally free. I totally endorse that one. It's about making that connection with the parents and not trying to be superior, because we're not. It's a team. We each have bits of information of that jigsaw puzzle. And if we respect each other's views, then we will achieve more. So yes, all kinds of ways you can engage with parents. The most difficult, I'll give you the most difficult parent I ever had to connect with. I tried every which way. She didn't come into the trainings. She didn't come to parents' nights, anything. And in the end, I phoned her and I said, will you meet me at Costa Coffee Tuesday lunchtime? I'll buy you a coffee and a sandwich. And she said, why, is he in trouble? I said, no, I just, you know, I want to meet you. And she turned up to Costa Coffee and I bought her a coffee and a sandwich. And she said, and she was really, you could see her like this. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, every time I had a rotten time at school, and every time school gets involved, they're moaning. And they're, you know, it's this, and we're not doing this, and he's not getting enough sleep, and he's not. And I said, well, I've just come to have a coffee with you and to say, I am his teacher. And can't we just work together? And I said, why don't we meet next week for a coffee? And you can tell me the things you would like, you know, me to be doing with them. And we ended up great friends. But it's, you've got to make that connection, folks. You've got to make that connection. We
You've
can't
got
do
to
it on
make
our
it
own.
work, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And well, there's everybody confirmed that the assessments in Tuesdays mornings are better than in any other day of the week. Okay. There was one, I don't know if to say comment or question, but it's, I'm going to read it as it was. As a struggling EFL teacher who happens to be high functional autistic, what are my technological choices to be approachable to my students and protecting my space?
Yes, yes. And that's something we haven't touched on in this. We have to recognize that we have teachers and educationists, let's call them, who might be autistic, who have ADHD, who are dyslexic, who, you know, everything. We are part of humanity. We are all part of humanity. One of my favorite head teachers, favorite head teachers has got rampant ADHD. He bounces down the corridors of his school, but he's a brilliant head teacher. It doesn't stop him being a brilliant head teacher, you know. So it's there's room for us all. But her question is, or his question, I don't know, is very precise. Now I can help you if you want to contact me via Twitter individually, because my answer would probably be precise to you. But the general answer is, you work out what you find acceptable. And by that, I don't mean, I'd like it to be positive, but I'm prepared to go acceptable. And what routes of connection that you find threatening or difficult to cope with quickly. A lot of people with that I know with autism prefer stuff to be written, presented. They don't like to be put on the spot quickly. You know, I want an answer now. Here's this question now. And they prefer to be allowed to kind of think about it and respond in their own way. But this might not be you. So what you have to do is work out what is right for you. You then look at how that is an advantage for your students or a disadvantage. Now, let's be blunt. If you were in a wheelchair, if you were a wheelchair user, you can't magically get out the wheelchair because it doesn't suit the students you work with. And neither can you magically get out of being dyslexic or anything. So it is about you first, protecting yourself first, and working out what you can manage. So what I would do is I'd do it in comfort zones. I'm entirely comfortable with this, and make that your major focus. And certainly on Thursday afternoons and all day Friday when you're tired, stay in your comfort zone. You might want to move out of your comfort zone and try some, push yourself a little bit now and again, but do it on a Tuesday morning and do it in a safe group. You know, if you've got a safe group of students, if you're going to experiment with a new bit of technology or a new way of interacting online, pick a little safe group and try it there, and gradually extend your repertoire. But don't be frightened to speak up and say, actually, this bit's not for me. I know people who, you very kindly sent me the questions ahead of time. I'm not bothered whether people send them or not, but I know people who won't do this kind of thing without knowing what they're going to be asked. Do you see what I mean? And that person, it's fair enough for them to say, no, I need to know what you're going to ask me, because that's their safety zone. So please, whoever you are who asked the question, if you want to get in touch, I will try and help more specifically, but it gets quite personal and I don't want to do that in a group.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, what resources do you recommend for families that have several children with autism in the same family?
That's really, really hard. And the default answer that I'm seeing around the world are tablets. And that's the default answer I'm seeing around the world. They try and get, they're using some of the cheaper ones, Kindle Fires and so on. I'm not convinced that's a brilliant thing at all. Some of the, if you've got several children with autism, they will all be different and again have different needs. But that doesn't mean children can't learn to wait. They can't learn to take turns. They can't learn to share. So it's about having everything there for those moments where you need to separate them off, but sometimes just having, you know, restricted things and putting them out. And again, this is a huge question. This is one which we could take about an hour answering. It's, I suppose, the simplicity, if I'm bringing it down to the simplicity, put as much tech in there as you can, because they do like technology. Make it, and on the whole, I've only met 2 people who are autistic who really don't get away with tech at all. And one of them is an absolute runner, like a marathon runner. And that's why, and they don't even like to listen to music. It's like, I just like to run. I just run. And, but it's quite rare. Technology tends to be, so as much as you can manage, yes. Mixing up, encouraging working with the family to mix it up, so physical exercise happens as well and creative things happen as well. There's some awful assumptions around about autistic children, that they're not creative. They're incredibly creative if it's something they're fascinated by, if it's a special interest. Not maybe what I want them to do with it, but you know, they can be very creative. So it's about mixing and matching. My heart goes out to those families. I will support in any way, shape, or I can. If they come in, if a parent comes to you asking for help, please listen to them. Quite frequently, educators will say, oh, he's not like that in school. She's not like that in school. Oh my goodness, they're not lying to you. If they're brave enough to come and say they're getting no sleep because of X, or they can't get the person to eat, they're telling you the truth, and they're kind of admitting that as a parent they're struggling, and that's a really hard thing for a parent to admit. So please, if you are an educator and a parent is brave enough to come and share with you that they need help, find help for them, find help.
Well, thank you. This was the last question. Just one comment. This that was written there. This can-do attitude is very interesting for everybody, not only for these teachers or these students. It's for everybody. So thank you very much, Carol.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Christina. And this brings us to the end. We touched upon a lot of interesting things, I think. You will find that we will summarize everything we discussed tonight in the report we will send out in the next couple of days. But just to summarize very quickly, we started off with this advice you got very early, Carol: become the very best teacher first and then specialized. I think this is a very good advice you got very early in your career, and that probably marked in many things the way how you are today. We talked about the classroom situation. We have to understand there's no one size fits it all approach. Every child is really a different case, and we have to understand the individual needs.
Can I just say one more little thing there?
Sure.
The more complex the child, you gave me kind of the parameters of almost mainstream. The more I'm fascinated, I do a lot of work out in America in particular on complex autism and how to connect with the child with complex autism and how to use technology effectively with those children. It's something I'm fascinated by. And can I just say that when you make that connection, usually through a process called intensive interaction, if you don't know what that is, Google it, because we haven't got time to do it now. But intensive interaction also works on every other human being I meet. So knowing how to put your breathing in sync with another human being, knowing how to echo what they're doing, making them feel that there is a genuine connection, understanding that listening comes from the heart. Listening is not hearing. Hearing, I can hear everything that's said to me. But if I'm thinking about, I have to go do lunchtime duty, or I need to go make the tea for the kids, I need to get away, that's not listening. The children, the more complex the child, the more they will know whether you are making a genuine connection with them. Once you've made that genuine connection, do you know what? You can move mountains.
Wonderful. Then we touched upon the importance of teamwork amongst the teaching staff and all the other people working in the school, and the personal connection with the parents, right? To link into the family situation, which at the end of the day is the best way probably to understand really the needs of each child, right? Then we talked about technology and realized that it's not really about technology. It's about how to use technology for effective teaching. So this brings us to the question that what's the role of the teacher? I mean, it's probably even more important with technology because we really have to make it work. And then we talked about different types of technologies. You mentioned 3 groups. The first group doing one thing exceptionally well. The second group, flexible products, framework products that gives you a space to then create your own content. Again, this, I guess, very, very helpful to really connect with individual needs of individual pupils. And then also think about how we can use really everyday technology we use at home in the teaching environment, right? And just to underline the can-do attitude as a very important thing as we have said before. So since you volunteered to be invited back again, I wrote down next time we will talk about the scanning pen and your stories with Princess Anne. So we have already 2 questions for the next time. And the very last thing, you mentioned the UK head teacher who's the best to follow for children's books.
Yeah.
I definitely want to know who that is.
Okay. Well, he's called Simon Smith. And so I think his Twitter handle is @SimSmith. But if you, what I'll do is I'll go on Twitter in about an hour's time and see if any of you've sent things and follow you. And I will put a shout out to Simon so that you can see it. Because I know you guys, Reschool follows me now. So I'll put you in direct link. The guy is just brilliant.
That's wonderful. As you know, we're all big fans of literature and children's reading. So we definitely want to contact with him and
he's my phone a friend for picture books in primary. Definitely.
Wonderful. So to conclude tonight, just give you information regarding the upcoming events. There will be in March and April events we do in Spanish language. We do Reschool event in Spanish and English language. The next 2 events will be in Spanish language. We had some audience tonight from Spain and Latin America. So you can please go to the website re.school to find information about those events as well. The next English speaking event we have in May, 12th of May, talking about exactly outstanding literacy resources. And then I would like to draw your attention to the annual big conference, the Reschool Forum 2021, where we discuss 2 days the challenges and for the future, and where we bring together a couple of handful experts to envision the future of schools. Because, and this comes back to also your very first words, Carol, if we don't use the opportunity we have right now to really invent the school of the 21st century, then it would be a shame. So Reschool is our part of this story, and we hope that everybody will join us for this event. And I wish you all a good night. Thank you very much. Carol, thank you so much for all your energy. It's Wednesday evening already, but you performed as Tuesday morning. 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you everybody who stuck with us and listened. And do keep in touch, because once I'm allowed to fly places, I will be heading out across the world again. I'd love to meet you for a coffee.
We will meet up somewhere in the world. I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful evening, and
bye-bye.
Until next
Good
time.
night. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.